Hello, everyone who's tuning in today to this short session. Today, Paulina, who's a marketing manager, is joined by Jörg Decker, IP product manager, to answer some of the most frequently asked questions about DDoS and Telia Carrier's DDoS solution. So, hello, Jörg. Nice to see you. So, could you start by providing a little more insight about DDoS and what it is?
In its most simplistic form, a DDoS attack is essentially a flooding of a network or a host in order to make that service unavailable. The attack can be all sorts of different methods, but generally it's just flooding that host with as much traffic as possible to overcome and overwhelm that host.
And what other types of attacks have we seen? Is this something that have changed or increased in the past couple of years, or has it always stayed the same?
Yeah, we've definitely seen an increase in the volume and also the complexity of the attacks. The attackers are getting a lot more sophisticated, using different mechanisms to avoid detection. One of the most obvious one is to use multiple sources. So rather than attacking from a single source with a large flow of traffic, they will distribute that source, which makes it harder to detect for us as well. Another thing we've seen is something called carpet bombing, where attackers randomly select different hosts within a network and attack for fairly short periods of time. Again, it makes it harder to detect and also then to mitigate that attack.
And how does DDoS service work?
So I think first, just a really quick overview of the different types of DDoS services that are available, and then show how our service works itself. So as a customer who's worried about DDoS attacks, you've got a few options open to you. One of them is an on-prem service. So if we imagine here, this is your prem on the left-hand side, you can purchase a piece of hardware, run it in-house, have your own IT department look after it, and you can filter all these attacks. This is typically what you call an inline service here. Cloud service DDoS protection is the second option. You would have heard a lot about that. Plenty of service providers out there will allow you to do this, where you divert traffic from the internet to a cloud service provider. They'll do the scrubbing there and pass the clean traffic back to you. And it just flows through the internet back through your service provider. The Telia Carrier service is based, as you see on the bottom option here, with the detection and mitigation that's done by your service provider. So next step, I'll go and look at a little bit about how the Telia Carrier DDoS service works. And the first step is, how do we detect it? So what does the system look like? We have, within AS 1299, we have our DDoS system that collects all sorts of information from all our edge routers. So the main bits of information that's used by the DDoS service is NetFlow, BGP, and SNMP. So it collects all of this information and analyzes it. So it collects that all from every single one of our edge routers, analyzes it against known threat intelligence and against known fingerprints for DDoS attacks. And all of this is constantly updated by our security operations team, and it's supported by our industry-leading DDoS vendor. What we have here on this slide is a normal flow of traffic, a piece of content from the right-hand side of the screen flowing across 1299 and onto an end user. The important thing to note is that normal traffic isn't impacted or affected at all by our DDoS system. It's not run in-house, it's not adding RTD, it's not doing anything else to that. So normal flow traffic just flows as it would do through our network. We have now an attack starting, so we've got a bit of malicious traffic also coming in. The target is our customer on the left-hand side, and that flows through, and as you can see, it's coming into two different entry points to AS 1299. That's just to show that an attack can come in anywhere into our network, and we will detect it. Once the DDoS system detects the attack has started, it'll initiate a redirect. So it sends out a BGP redirection instruction to all edge routers in AS 1299, which will redirect all the traffic destined to that host. into our nearest scrubber. We have 5 scrubbing locations in AS1299, and we can redirect down to a host, so a single /32. The reason we do that, and the great thing about that, actually, it means that any other legitimate traffic to that customer that isn't under attack can still flow through the network as it would do normally without being redirected towards a scrubber. So you can see here now, all of the traffic has been redirected to that scrubber, and clean traffic then passes through that scrubber and goes back to its normal path as well. Once our DDoS system has detected the attack is over, it will send out a message to withdraw that redirection to all the edge routers, and normal peacetime routing has been restored.
So what is multi-home DDoS service?
Going back to the different types of DDoS service you can have, if you are a large service provider or large enterprise who typically will buy service from 2 or even more service providers, the downside of buying from your service provider is typically you'd have to buy a DDoS service from each of those service providers. What the Telecarrier multi-home DDoS service allows you to do is just buy DDoS from us. Still buy internet service from others or even peer some of your traffic away, but you only need to buy the DDoS service from us. So it works pretty similarly to the base DDoS, but there are some key differences which we can go into now. So in this setup here, we have a customer here connected to ISP2 and AS1299, and also a peer or multiple peers. The main difference is we can analyze all the traffic that flows through 1299 and detect attacks. But perhaps there's traffic that doesn't flow through us, and that would be our blind spot, essentially. So the first thing we need to do is cover off that blind spot. And the way we do that is we ask customers to send us net flow data and SNMP data from their CPE routers or their edge routers that are facing the other networks and upstreams. So that's a key consideration. That is sending us a bit more information. We ingest that, and the same detection process happens as I explained earlier. The second difference is how then, if we do detect an attack that is coming to that customer, but it's coming in via their other service provider, how do we get hold of that traffic in order to scrub it? So yeah, in this example, we can now see an attack that started and it's coming in through the customer's other service provider. We've detected that attack because we're seeing that through NetFlow, and our DDoS system now initiates another hijack. It's similar to the first one, but as you can see, we now send that announcement externally. So what we're doing here is we're announcing a BGP more specific for the prefixes that are under attack. So that's typically a /24 announcement that goes out to the internet, which will say, we as AS1299, we have a very direct path to this prefix, this /24. Please send all the traffic to us. So what that will encourage to happen is ISP2 now will, instead of sending this traffic directly to the customer, will send it to AS1299 instead. Here, the edge router will see that coming in. It will see that we have initiated a redirect to the nearest scrubber, scrub the traffic, send the clean traffic back to the direct port that customer is connected to AS1299, same as the old service, as the previous service as described. Once the attack is over, we release that more specific announcement, and peacetime routing is returned. So the ISP2 now can send traffic direct to the customer, as can the peer as well. So the key things to remember here for the multi-homing service is we must receive net flow data from the customer, as well as SNMP data. We use SNMP data to be more granular on the data we look at. So this typically will help us identify external interfaces on the customer's edge router and only look at flow data we need to look at. It also helps with baselining of the amount of traffic that typically goes to that customer, which again helps with detection. And we also need to be able to friendly hijack customer traffic. That would mean that a customer normally is advertising prefixes larger than the /24 to the internet, which means the more specific will win. Those prefixes also need to be covered by RPKI ROAs. As 1299 and a big advocate for manners and RPKI validation, we will only announce prefixes that are covered, that we're authorized to do, and covered by an RPKI ROA. So the customer must be able to add AS1299 as an originating ASN with a max prefix length of /24 for any protected prefixes they want to use multi-homing for. And that in a nutshell is how multi-homing works.
So having a DDoS service obviously gives you access to a lot more data than you would have without it. In terms of, how does that relate to GDPR, and is there anything to keep in mind there?
Yeah, sure. It's a good question. And it's particularly relevant to the multi-homing service, I guess, when customers are sending us even more data than we normally have access to. Now, running a network the size of AS1299 means we do have a lot of visibility into customer flows. We use that, we do collect that information. We use that information anyway internally for our network forecasting, our network modeling, our failure scenario analysis, and all of that. For DDoS, we do go an extra level deeper into the detail. But really, again, it's purely for the purpose of supplying that service. And I think that's a really key part of GDPR, and what covers GDPR is only collect what you need to and only keep it for as long as you need to. So that's exactly what we do. We do not retain detailed flow information because the vast quantities of it, it would be almost a practical impossibility anyway, but we keep it only for the purpose of supplying the DDoS service for detecting the attacks. And as I say, we do not keep it any longer than we need to.
So does Telia Carrier offer a kind of premium IP transit service that by default includes DDoS?
This is a good question. Again, we don't currently offer an all-inclusive transit service that is clean and always has DDoS switched on. It is something we're looking at and considering in the future. And I think being largely a wholesale transit provider, this isn't typically a service that we would roll out. It's typically something more relevant to enterprise customers. And it is something, as I say, we are looking to roll out. We currently have a charging mechanism by which we charge on mitigation minutes. So you can enable DDoS and we will alert you to any attacks you may be under. And we only actually start charging you for the minutes of mitigation that gets consumed.
So what is Telia Carrier's maximum DDoS traffic capacity that's available right now?
So in terms of ultimate scrubbing capacity, which typically is the question, how many scrubbers do you have? What's the capacity? We've got 5 scrubbing locations. I've mentioned that previously. Each are scalable to well over 400 gigs per second, just by adding some modules in them before we have to add another chassis, right? So each location can scale way above that. I think it's possibly best to say that we have successfully mitigated an attack of in excess of 990 gigs in 2020. That was our highest peak we've ever seen of an attack. And we did that with our TMS capacity. And the reason that we are able to do that with a lower installed base of TMS capacity is actually we have multiple ways of mitigating attacks. It isn't just using the vendor-specific scrubbers that we've got located in those locations. We do a huge amount of filtering in our edge. We kind of look at AS1299 as a TMS system itself. We can push a lot of that filtering right down to the edge of the network. And we also have specific dedicated routers that sit right in front of the TMSs that do another layer of filtering as well. So the TMS is our last line of defense. So I think it's fair just to say we've got a very scalable DDoS platform, and ultimately, without any real hardship or forklift upgrades, we could upgrade each of our 5 scrubbing locations to 400 gigs without any problems whatsoever.
Can we get the monthly report through the portal and in an enhanced form? And if so, when?
Portal development is in progress. We don't currently have DDoS in the portal. It is scheduled to be in there in Q3. We send customers reports currently via email and in PDF format. The mitigation detail is also sent on a monthly basis in terms of usage, just showing how many minutes of mitigation have been consumed in that previous month. But the portal will contain all of that. The portal will have all active and previous mitigations, alerts, and details on the attack types as well. We've got Q3 as our target for launching that.
Is there any alternatives to the billing method that Telia Carriers offers right now? For example, based on clean traffic, based on ports, and so on.
So currently our only charging model is based on mitigation minutes. We actually find this a pretty unique and a quite fair way of charging, because essentially you're not being charged based on dirty traffic, for example, for how big your attack is or how often you're under attack. And it doesn't matter where the attack's coming in from. It's purely when we apply mitigation to the end of when that mitigation has started, and we just count those minutes and we take that off of your allowance. As mentioned before, we are looking at introducing an all-inclusive tier or option, and I think this will be potentially available next year, but it will be available to more likely the enterprise customers rather than the wholesale.
So next question, can we have a DDoS quick deployment option marketed? So for example, a CSC or a NOC that can be implemented within minutes on a Sunday night when a client is under attack?
This is something we're working on, because I think essentially the way that our detection works, it kind of runs all the time. So to add another monitored prefix is fairly simple. The complexity we have here is how to return that traffic to the customer once we've cleaned it. So it's not a 24/7 easily switched on option at the moment, but we are looking to bring this in, and this is something called making use of a dirty VRF. At the moment, our system uses a clean VRF to return that traffic to the customer, and for that reason, there's some networking configuration that needs to happen when we onboard a customer on our side, and that's not something that we can get the NOC or CSC to do out of hours. But once we move to a dirty VRF solution, onboarding customers middle of the night should be super simple. It's not seen as a complete replacement, so I think it's a good option for a cry for help out of hours. But essentially, if a customer wants the full DDoS solution, that'll be a follow-up discussion with sales engineers' involvement and everything else, just to make sure that we're covering the customer's requirements correctly. And Express DDoS is something we're looking to be able to offer customers. And again, we're targeting Q4 for that this year.
So last up, we have a few quick fire questions. So we'll start with number one. Is there a learning phase to learning the DDoS service?
Yes, sure answer. There absolutely. So DDoS works really on thresholds and anomalies. So there is a period during the delivery phase where the system learns what is normal for that customer. And that's what's meant by the learning phase. Now, if a customer then has a slight change in their profile, say a year or so down the line, they can ask us to redo the learning phase, just in case they've had some false positives or something like that during the course of the service. But yes, it's there to baseline the service, and it happens during the delivery process.
And what if I realized that I made a mistake on the IP addresses?
Okay, so yeah, to make changes, adds changes to prefixes that are protected. Once the service is up and running, that there's a process by which those changes go through the CSC. So a simple contact the CSC, update the template form, and then that change will be processed as soon as possible. This is something we're looking to add into the portal as well for very minor adds and changes to existing configurations. So it should be very simple.
And am I limited in the number of IP addresses that I can use?
No, not at all. The way you can do it in large prefixes, list all your prefixes. You can list your hosts down to /32 as well if you like. So you don't have to protect your entire /24 or network range. You can protect individual hosts and you can list them all out. Or you can just aggregate them under your /24s or /23s or whatever you've got, and you can list as many of those as you like. That's not a charging basis for us either. Again, all it comes down to is how many minutes of mitigation are consumed.
How do I make changes on my MO configuration?
That's very similar to just changing an IP address. So an MO is a managed object, and a managed object just holds the list of prefixes and the detection types you want associated with those prefixes. So making any of those kind of changes, again, is just done through updating the template. You can do that with the assistance of a sales engineer, or you can do it by yourself, and then just send that through to CSC, and those changes will be implemented.
And how do I handle manual detection with my equipment?
You can do that. You can do detection yourself. It's not something we recommend. We don't offer a mitigation only service. That's typically something like a cloud service provider may offer, where you do the detection and then you steer the traffic to them. They'll mitigate it, clean it, and send the traffic back. Our service really is around the quality of detection. We do offer the ability to have auto or manual mitigation. So you can ask us just to do the detection. We'll send you the alerts when you're under attack, and you can then tell us to mitigate that attack. We do recommend customers opt for the auto mitigation option, which means this is a beautifully automated service and customers don't have to get involved at attack time at all, and just let the system take care of it all. We are looking at ways in which we can offer a subset mitigation service by either using a BGP community or flow spec, which says, please redirect these prefixes to your TMSs, but that's not a service that's up and running at the moment. And that's probably a late Q4, early 2022 service that we may be offering.
Thank you so much for providing all those answers and insights, Georg. And thank you for everyone who might be tuning in. Until next time.
Thank you.